Hello, welcome to the Coder Kids podcast. I'm James Thornock, your host as always, and this week we have a special guest, Gail Swift. She is the founder of Plans to Prosper Coaching. She's constantly spending time with students and adults, trying to help them really discover, well, and you can say this better than I can in a second here, but really discover what they're good at already and what is their lane. So welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, James. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you on. We've constantly been or recently been on this riff of what are some tools that we can give parents and students in order to help make kind of future planning in general a little bit easier and a little bit more sure. So, what really got you interested in the brain or personalities or what you do in the first place?
What got me interested in it was having kids of my own. First of all, I've known how I've worked. My conative score is a 4-digit number. I've known that since 1991. And my husband took it, but it wasn't until my kids were born and I recognized that when I would ask them to do something, they would not always be in agreement with how I asked them to do it, but that I asked them to do it. And so when they were around 2 and 4, I recognized some pretty serious differences in how they both solved problems. And I, of course, just have my past from what I grew up with.
Right.
And therefore, I was parenting through that lens. And so I was watching them and I realized, similar to me, everyone has a way of solving problems. And I wanted to see what their way was to be able to encourage them to solve problems their way.
Well, that is pretty compelling. I mean, yeah, there's so many things I could talk about before that, but let's dig deeper into that. So, what are some of these ways that you've discovered?
So should I share my screen with you now? Would that
Yeah,
be
that would be great.
appropriate?
Yeah.
Okay, let me work on doing that. So all right, screen 2. Let's see,
And then
share.
we can focus in on it. For those who are not watching the YouTube version, we're pulling up. Well, I guess you can describe it.
Yes. These are the 3 parts of the mind that have been there since Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. They've been around for a long time. A woman by the name of Kathy Kolbe developed an algorithm to measure the 3rd part of the mind, which is what I focus on to find the pattern in my kids, this doing part, and it's called conative. So she developed an algorithm to measure this part of the mind in which is the pattern for how they take action that's permanent. They're born with it and it doesn't come from your parents. It's not hereditary, it's unique to you. So when I recognize their pattern, which is this doing part of the mind, let me see. Your stream is still running. I have another slide.
Okay.
I wonder if I could just bring it up. I
Yeah,
wonder
for
if I
sure.
should. All right, let me stop sharing and then try it again. All right, here we go. All right. There are a lot of ways we can go with this too, James. You're right about
Okay.
that. There are a lot of ways. So my kids were so different, and I have 2 boys. They're now 14 and 16. And when I was raised in a family of 1 hour of electronics, like a week,
Oh, a week.
I
Whew.
watched, yeah, I watched one program. It was on Monday night from 7 to 8. And that was all I could watch. And so my son, when he was little and super little, when I would put him in his room for a timeout or a break or whatever the case may be, I would notice, James, that I'd come back in his room and he would sweetly take the clock radio apart into so many pieces. I didn't even know that many existed. And then he would I'd put him in another time and I'd come back in and, the closet doors were off their hinges without even a tool. So I saw, before I knew his pattern, I saw this. It was a talent, even though it was it was a little frustrating, because there was something missing from his room or taken apart physically every time I went in there.
Hmm.
And I remember one time he was 2.5 and my son was in a carrier and we were talking to the babysitter and my husband had left his laptop open downstairs.
Oh,
And you see where this is going.
yeah.
My 2.5-year old, like, he took off every single key from the laptop with the foam and the spring, and it was completely into pieces within a matter of 10 minutes. And
So
that's
just
when he was, yeah.
so just like this. So if you some keyboards actually allow you to take it apart, he would probably love this. Yeah.
And he
Wow.
cleans his keyboard every few months now.
Oh yeah. That's fun. Yeah, that would just be a fun activity for him, I think. Yeah.
It is. Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah, we actually had another guest talked about taking apart his clock radio as well. So he's certainly not the only person to do that, and that was just like a few episodes ago. So yeah, that tinker mindset, it doesn't rest, does it?
It was hard to keep up with. I honestly, it was like I couldn't, he out Legoed me. I like couldn't buy enough Legos for him to put together. And when he was young, I noticed that before school, if he would embark on a Lego, and I'd say, "All right, let's go to school," and he would freak out, and I would say, "Let's just leave. Let's just go, and you can work on it later." And I didn't know at the time that he needs to finish what he starts. So he would be like, "I need to finish this Lego," and I didn't know that was a need of his because James, it is not a need of mine,
Hmm.
but it is a need of his. And I only recognized that after I knew how he worked and found out his pattern for taking action.
Yeah, so I want to ask you a question because this has spurred a question just right now in this
Yeah.
moment where I used to teach in public school and we used to have there are just a lot of teachers, and if that have this kind of mindset, if like you're not doing the assignment, then you're like, it's almost like you're bad. It's not like you need some sort of accommodation or anything. It's just like you should be doing this regardless. And the way you talk about it with taking him to school, theoretically a good thing. He's got to finish this project. And I feel very similarly with my free time. Like if I'm reading a book, I have to finish the chapter. Otherwise, like I'm all out of sorts. It's like my brain, like you can take the activity from me, but I will not be able to stop thinking about the chapter until it's completed. And so do you get parents that message you and say, hey, I really don't understand this behavior. It doesn't make any sense to me. It seems like it's misbehaving, but maybe not. Like, when do parents come to you? Are they trying to be proactive, or are they trying to just like figure something out? Or yeah.
And good question. Obviously, conative it's a sneaky stress. Parents come to me when there's a difference. So for example, I'm pointing to these modes right here, and
Okay.
this red mode, we're going to talk about one of these modes. We're going to focus on this blue one. This is a 1 through 10. This is a 1 through 10 cylinder, and this is the mode of organization and systems. And this is where my son starts the problem solving process. This is the need for a plan. And I'm going to answer your question with this. I am up here in the natural shortcut, and he is down here in the natural plan. So parents come to me when there is a difference with how their child naturally takes action versus how they naturally take action. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Because there's a difference. So I was saying to him, because I don't have a need to finish what I start. And James, this 1 through 10, it doesn't matter if you're a 1 or a 10 in each of these modes. The only difference is time spent. That's the only difference in the number, is time spent there. So I don't have a need to finish what I start. My son Noah does. And so therefore, when I know that as a mom and he asks me where we're going when we run errands, and I'll say,
Hmm.
we have 3 errands, but I just need to run across the street. He's like, that's not in the plan. That is not part of the process. That's not in the plan. And so I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, instead of belittling him or making him feel that he's strange for not being able to add one on or shortcut or skip steps, which is what I would have done had I not known this information. Now I go with his natural grain instead of against it. And I don't try and make him be like me. I want to encourage him to be and contribute his way, because then he has natural consequences when he contributes his way.
Okay. Right. So you're trying to reinforce who a child already is. You're not trying to like change them to whatever it is that you're thinking and how you think.
Exactly.
Is that right? Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
What and at what point do you, and I guess how would you teach your child that? And I run into a lot of adults like this who think like, it's either everybody is just a copy of me, and some people are good copies, and some people just like they must just be dumb because they don't do what I do. And I think the truth is like they're motivated by different things, and that's easy for me to see because of some different training that I've had, not the specific ones that you're talking about, but some personality types, whether it's the Enneagram or the energy type from Carl Tuttle or whatever. So I'm familiar with some of these different lenses, but how would you teach, say, your son? I guess you have two, but how would you teach your son, hey, there are other types out there. You can't expect them, like you're being really, highly accommodating of him. But how do you teach him like, well, not everyone's going to be completely accommodating of your master plan. How do you help him deal with that?
By putting them in situations where they're not going to win.
Can you say that one more time?
By putting them into situations they're not going to win.
Huh. And what do you mean by cannot win? What's the definition of win?
The definition, well, and this is a mistake I made, James, when he was young. Before I leaned into this about him, I would put him in situations where he would succeed. Now that I knew his number, I always put him in situations, or generally speaking, I would put him in situations where he would thrive and succeed, which is natural for a mom. You want your kid to succeed. But what I was recognizing about the age of 8 or 9 is I was creating an arrogant child. I was creating an arrogant child because he believed he could win and be good at anything. Because I would put him in situations where he would be good at anything. And that was my mistake, to do that. Because when you see how someone works, and I had their pattern in my hands. Like, I have proof of how they're going to solve problems. This is not going to change for the rest of your life. He's born this way and he's going to die this way. This is not your personality. It's after you have the motivation from your personality profile, then when you decide to do something, this is the pattern of how you're going to do it. So
okay, so this is the execution method.
This is the execution method. That's a really good way to put it. Okay. Yes. And a detriment of what I did as a mom for me is in hindsight, of course, I would have put him in situations where there's difficulty and struggle. And I would watch him succeed with and beyond that trouble because I see that he can do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because when you put a kid in a situation where there are others around doing it better, he instantly learns that there are other ways of doing things besides his own.
Okay. I think I'm understanding. Let me see if I can repeat this back just to make sure I fully understand this, because this is nice. I like actually having people on who can really teach me stuff. So what you're trying to say is that if you put him in situations only in situations that he is good at the thing, right? then his opinion of himself is going to be almost directly correlative to his success with whatever task it is. And so in order to perhaps add a little bit more humility, that's a word that I inserted there. So I'm trying
Yep.
not to put anything in your mouth. It's important to put him in situations where he's challenged and can also see other people doing things differently and things that will
Yes.
intentionally challenge him. So you're not saying like, hey, I'm putting him in a situation in which he can't win. It's all negatives. That's not what you're saying. You're saying situations that are difficult inherently can be benefit. So there is a benefit, but maybe it's not the same like win condition of like, of just like getting an A in a class or something. There are other benefits. Okay, I think
Absolutely. There needs to be a challenge. For a humility, having humbleness, humility, there needs to be a challenge. That's an efficacy score that I work with. When I work with kids, there's an efficacy score ranging from arrogance to very insecure. And that's a subjective profile. That's subjective. That's not conative. That's more affective. And when I measure that, the arrogant person, and I was arrogant. So I'm speaking from experience. I, just like you mentioned earlier, I thought my way of solving problems was the best way. And why isn't everyone doing it my way?
Oh yeah.
Because I mean, that's normal. Like that made sense for me. And I literally was thinking like, oh my gosh, if you didn't spend so much time, or if you just did this and you just did that, like it was so clear. I was arrogant. I was so arrogant. Honestly, even when my husband took this, I'm like, yeah, that's nice, but really? It wasn't until my kids came along and I wanted to get along with them. I wanted to
You had
I
motivation.
I totally did. I didn't want to butt heads with them on something I couldn't control. And if I can't change this about them, why in the world would I spend my energy trying to do so if it's a solid in them?
Yeah, and this actually goes back to like pretty ancient philosophy, kind of what you were talking about with Aristotle. I have a philosophy minor, so I know a little
Okay,
bit
all right,
about
cool.
thoughts. And one of the huge arguments in human development in general is, nature versus nurture. And I think the parent, it's a raging debate, but I think what you often find is that parents who have had enough kids will always their opinions are a little bit more nuanced and I think informed. I was first of 7 kids, so to some extent we're like I think you said in a different podcast, wired in a specific way, and it's
Yes.
really not going to change. And so some of this is inborn, and then obviously some behaviors are learned, and certainly English, or whatever language that you speak is evidence that you can learn things. But yeah, that's really fascinating. So I guess where would you fall? Nature versus nurture. Would you say like 50%? Would you say a person is like, yeah, where would you fall on that scale? This is just for fun.
So, okay, so this doesn't change. This is in you. You're born with this.
For
You're
sure.
born with a pattern of taking action. The other two, cognitive and affective, the other two parts of the mind, cognitive changes based on your experience, based on your lifetime, how old you are, what you know, what you've been brought up with, your mind, your reasoning. Affective or personality could change based on if any trauma has happened to you. Your lens of how you see the world, introvert, extrovert, can change based on feelings and your environment. Those are fluid, in my opinion. Those are fluid. All three of them work together. All three of them work together. You can't have one without the other. I'm going to separate it a little bit. Can you do activity without using conative, third part of the mind? And the answer is yes, you can. And that's when it's a habit. Because when work is a habit, you don't put forth any mental energy. In order to see this number show up in people, they need to try. It's based on striving and trying. If you're in leisure and you're having fun and you're Netflix binging or you're outside or you're doing whatever you do, you won't see this pattern of taking action.
So
It's
it's only when
only
presented
when
with
you're
problems.
striving.
Okay.
Yes. Problems that they want to solve.
Ah, okay.
Problems that they want to solve. Now, how this was showing up, both of my kids are extremely different conatively. So, Noah, the older one who I was just talking about before, and the younger one, Noah in this 1 through 10 scale, Noah's an 8, and my other son, Tyler, is a 1 up here. This is how it shows up in real life. Tyler has a mess. He doesn't make his bed. And when they shared a room, Noah would make his bed very neatly and orderly because he has a need for order.
Okay.
Tyler does not. So Noah would start to give Tyler a hard time, saying he was a slob, he was less than, he wasn't all right because he didn't make his bed. Now, that's a character issue that is not okay because making your bed or not making your bed has nothing to do with a decent person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It also relates to some stuff on mindfulness that I've been talking about, where you have like the behavior and you're trying to separate it, or like the situation, you're trying to separate it from value judgments necessarily. And that's tough. It's really, really tough because like that's a little bit built into us. Like, you know, you see someone and you got to determine like, are they a danger to me? Like, are they like, what box do they fit in? How do I interact with that person? Right. If someone has a
Right.
uniform on in a grocery store, you can like ask them questions, and that's a acceptable thing to do. If it's just another person like you in the grocery store, you could theoretically talk to them, but it's a little bit less socially acceptable. So this is really interesting. And
So
this whole separation. Go ahead.
as a mom, I mean, just leaning into how my son worked, just leaning into it and not making it, trying to make it different. And I recognized, of course, he would take his whole room apart, and I couldn't afford the Legos to keep up with his brain. So I took him to what I call a chop shop made by some engineering grads at a local college we were near. And I went in and I said to the owner, I said, Chris, can you please give him a printer? Just give him a printer. Just see what I'm talking about. Like, is this normal for a kid? Cause it's driving me nuts. Like I can't, I don't know how to deal with this. And so he brought out a printer, an old printer for Noah. And my other son wanted to take a mallet to it and just beat it up. But Noah takes a screwdriver, actually 2 screwdrivers. And he, just like he did when he was in his room when he was 2 years old, he took the whole thing apart. 2.5 hours later, I was in this chop shop keeping my other son occupied, and I was like exhausted. And I said to Noah, I said, buddy, how long do you think we've been here? And he said, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes.
Wow. Yeah.
He's in his lane, James. He's
Yeah.
in his lane. So I started asking neighbors and friends to drop off appliances, except for microwaves and televisions. I said, can you please drop them off? And so those were his toys.
Yeah.
Those were his toys. And no surprise at all. What he's doing right now, he builds PCs.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Going with the grain, right? Going with the grain.
Yeah. Does he do it on his own? I'm like curious because like I built my own PC that we're like using to talk to each other on, right? So yeah, so he does it on his own? Does he own his own company? How does that work?
He just turned 16.
Okay.
And so he does it on his own.
Yeah.
He researches the parts. He has a friend. He's built 4 of them.
Nice.
So far, he has companies that he works with better than other. He likes what they do. He likes what they provide, the customer service they have. He does his due diligence, but then he gets his hands on it, just like he did so long ago.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to point out is that this is a risk column. This is a dealing with risk and uncertainty. He is a 1. So his efforts and energy, James, go into making sure things are stable and not changing. So when
That's
he's
so
working with
interesting.
parts, when he's working with when he's working with computer parts and systems, he will work with companies that he can count on, that do what they say they're going to do. And with everyday life, if he's striving, changes and unforeseen circumstances, he works with the details and the systems to avoid risk. That's what he does. Now, his brother that I told you was so different is a 9 in this.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, they're different.
And is this on the Colby strengths chart? Is that what you're talking about?
It is. It
Okay.
is. Yes.
I can't see your mouse cursor for some reason. So,
Oh, I'm
um,
sorry.
no,
Okay.
that's fine. So when you're talking about a 9 on the
The green.
systematize, oh, the green. Okay. On improvisation. Okay.
The green. Yeah, the green.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. And improvisation. That is really interesting.
One of the things that happened when we first moved to Vegas, where I am now, and the reason this is me trusting this as a mom, and honestly, this surpasses age because kids are talented, whether they're, I mean, whatever age they are, because they're born with this. So when I knew it and I told you I was trying to lean in and I'm not trying to go against it. So Noah is the only one in the family that needs to finish what he starts. The rest of us don't have a need. So when the gas grill came to the house and Noah was 11 and he wanted to put it together, like, who does that, right? So my husband comes home from work and he's like, yeah, no, it's a gas grill. We just got it. I don't know if that's a good idea. And I remember, I know Noah's MO. And I said, hun, can we just let him try it? It's a big Lego. And so at 108 degrees outside at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, he takes hot mitts and he starts unbundling all of the pieces for the grill. And he's taking them out of the wrappers. Screws are flying everywhere. He's trying to gather them up. I go out around 2:30 and bring him some water and provisions. And he said, Mom, I made a mistake. And instead of saying, gosh darn it, I knew this wasn't a good idea, I said, what did you do about it? And he said, I turned back a page. Like he wouldn't a Lego if it wasn't a fit. He turned back a page. He said, and can you help me turn this upside down because I can't get leverage, but I'm doing it right now. I'm doing it right. So I helped him shimmy some stuff in and then went back in and came out an hour later and he was just sweating because it's so hot.
Yeah.
And I brought him some more water and I cleared the garbage away and put the screws in a pile and asked him how things were going and what page he was on. And he said, I'm on page 58 of 89.
Goodness
I was
gracious.
like, okay. I mean,
Who
and
made
so
this
he
gas
did.
grill?
He finished it. He finished it at 5 o'clock. It took him 4 hours.
Wow.
He finished the whole thing. But if I didn't know that about him, James, I would never have let him put the grill together. But he had the motivation because he asked to do it. And I said that that's a key ingredient is the motivation. And then I knew that he would finish what he started. And he did.
That is
And that was
incredible.
fun.
Can you tell me what his face looked like when he came in?
What his face looked like, he was all red and sweaty and he had the biggest grin on his face and he held up his tools and he's like, I did it. I did it, Mom. I put the whole thing together. Of course I knew he would. He was so happy. Yeah, he was so happy.
That's so awesome. It's really interesting. Like humans, we're interesting creatures, but the harder, and you actually learn this as a principle of game design, something we teach, that the harder the challenge when it is completed, and when especially there's a clear signal that something is complete. Like the grill working, there's a really clear signal. Hey, this thing works. That produces just an incredible feeling for it's pretty short amount of time, but it does. And like I went on a 50-mile hike and like I didn't die, and so I was really happy about that. When I was half my age I am now, and it's so that's really fascinating. You talk about just the reward of this, and you talk about something else I want to ask you about. This it's like literally the opposite thing, which is the lights going out. You said the lights go out with some
Right.
kids around, is it middle school, is seventh, eighth grade, something you said?
Third grade. Third
When?
grade.
Third grade.
Third.
Okay.
Hmm.
So this is kind of the opposite phenomenon, right? Where you don't have the jubilance, you don't have the exultant, I just completed something. You have something different. Can you explain what that is and how to recognize it?
So, James, the reason the lights didn't go out with Noah is because he operates similarly to 80% of the teachers in the educational system.
Mm.
So, his conative strengths are in line with teachers. And at the beginning, you asked me, when do parents get a hold of me? And I said, when there's difficulty and there's differences in how they both do things.
Mm.
The reason the lights go out, usually age 7 or 8 in the educational system, is exactly that same reason, is when you have a student that simply solves problems differently than the school system teaches them.
There are a
Noah,
lot of those students.
there,
Yeah.
50%, 50%. Yes. So my other son is completely the opposite of the way teachers work. Completely. Meaning potential suicide risk is up, depression, medication, ADD, ADHD diagnosis.
Sure.
My other son is the opposite. We were just having this conversation, the three of us, the other day, and oh my gosh, this is just it hurts my belly right now to have to have my other son go into regular high school, and Noah, the engineer, was like, I don't understand how can he? Why do you make allowances or make exceptions for him? Like when it's easy, it's easy for me. All he has to do is like buckle down or apply. I said, Noah, let me ask you this. If you were to be put in a field with all sorts of huge equipment and a lot of parts, and I was to tell you to make something creative every single day with your hands for 7 hours, would you like that? And he's like, that would be horrible. That would be awful. I would not want to do that. I said, that's Tyler in school. That's the way Tyler feels every day going to school.
Yeah. Gosh. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think a ton of people relate to that. I mean, I think basically every comedian has a bit about like how they either pranked a teacher or they just like they didn't fit in and they knew it wasn't their drive. Like lunch was their favorite subject, right? Where
Right.
they got to like play for audiences, right? Where
Yeah.
they could test out their comedy and everything. And it's not just comedians, it's a lot of other people who do a lot of other useful work as well. Not throwing any shade comedians' way. They are producing something that's beneficial to a lot of us. So,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, I think that is part of the message that you're trying to get across. If I'm picking it up properly, a lot of you parents have this really sincere desire. A lot of you have called me and asked me, and this is how I know that, man, I want to do what's right for my kid. I want them to explore different options. I want them to find out what they're good at. Sometimes coding is really that thing. Sometimes it's not, and that's fine. But there's a lot of this like uncertainty, and is that what you're trying to give them? Is just a little bit
Yes.
more certainty about
Yeah.
what ballpark
Now I
they
can
can go into?
They can absolutely. I can work with 3-year-olds and up. And it's a bag of toys with 3-year-olds. So, with a bag of toys, based on how that child manipulates what he or she manipulates or picks up, we can tell the difference between striving behavior and play, like what they're trying to do and what they're not trying to do.
Mm.
And based on that pattern, many things will come true, many headaches will be saved. So, for example, with my other son, you can't see my cursor, but my other son in this red James, which
The
says
fact
fact
finding.
finder. Yeah, it deals with details and information. Details. In order, of course, teachers are generally down there in the red and the blue and up in the green and the yellow. That's generally where teachers are. But my son, Tyler, is a 2 in the red. So that means his best decisions, his best work needs very little detail to move forward. Needs very little detail. So, of course, when he was 7 in third grade, he's like, I feel stupid. I feel, dumb, like I can't fit in or belong. And he actually does, but he doesn't need a lot of detail to move forward with his decision.
That's interesting. I keep saying that's interesting, but that's because it's like actually new information. So
I know, and you're absorbing it. I can sense that
yeah,
you're trying to like soak it in. So when this doesn't change, and the school tells you as a parent that you need to read, with your child for an hour, basically a night, for the rest of his life, there was a point where it got brutal. Like it was brutal. Unless we read to him, that's different. And we read to him. We love that. But when he had to read on his own, it was like fighting tooth and nail, like clawing and tears. And it was before I knew this about him. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have every night be a battle. Like, what's wrong with him? Why won't he fall in line? Is my thinking as a mom. Why won't he do this thing that the system's telling us to do that I believe is the right thing to do? Everyone has to learn how to read.
yeah.
But when we read to him, it was fine. It was the transference. And we tried so many different things. And so we just made it look different for him because it got to be, and he's slightly dyslexic, and it got to be such a chore. We had to back off to save our relationship with our son. We had to just back off. And then finally, we had to wait until he was like 10 or 11, a fourth grade reading level, to take this. And then I saw this, and similar to you, just absorbing this, I must have stared at his pattern and just cried. I just cried because I felt so bad for putting him in such anguish and stress for a natural gift that he has, trying to make it different as a mom, trying to fight it. And I felt really bad. And I wish I would have known earlier, because it would have saved us a lot of tears to do that.
Well, that's tough. A
Yeah.
lot of what you're talking about has to do with school, has to do with traditional styles of learning. Do you have any insights of how education might look in the future, or something that might be a little bit more accommodating, I guess, for different paths? Do you think there should be entirely different schools, or a school with different houses? Kind of like Harry Potter. You got different different houses where they kind of work in a similar way. Private, public, charter, homeschool. There's a lot of different options out there. What are your thoughts?
I believe we are born with a curiosity. I believe we're born with a natural want and desire to learn. I believe that that's in us. I believe that when we are given the freedom to learn what we want to learn our way, we will continue to learn for the rest of our lives. But a lot of people take a break during school, and they go into robotic mode, and then they just have to turn it off and learn the way people are telling them to learn. And it's only when they've stopped being told how to do things and they resurrect the freedom that they once knew before they were 8, how to do things their way. If we can change that chunk that's taken away from them and give them the freedom to learn their way, I believe they'll not stop learning. And yes, there are entities right now that promote that. Several different schools that I work with that promote that freedom in how kids learn and do things successfully.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And that's, right in line with our philosophy as well, right? I was taught to hate Shakespeare, The teacher loved it, but the way they taught it was so punishing. And it was, the only interpretation that could have been correct was the teacher's interpretation. And I had a few minor disagreements, and so I just hated it. And then, yeah, it was after high school that I thought, wow, this is some good stuff. Right? It was, like you said, it's after the pause. So, yeah, well, I hope that, parents can take this information and actually apply it when it comes to technology, which we're all up into. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you have some, I don't know if you call them quizzes or assessments on the website to kind of determine this, how to take action, and maybe get some more information to move forward with. Can you explain the technology or how it works?
So it's through me, or you can go on my website. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Having a conversation is important first. Like,
Okay.
why would this be important to you? And I don't want to fix, I want to help understand.
Mm.
That's a big difference. I do not want someone to obviously think that it can change. So this is helping parents know how their child works and know that this doesn't change about their child. So when you know that this doesn't change, you can let them, and I'll teach you how to work their way, and then natural consequences ensue. And it happens every single time. So one of our huge things was to raise a contributor, and I wanted to raise someone that contributed to the world. As far as the tests that go with it, it depends on the age of the student. So if the child is like from 3 to 9 years old, it's a bag of toys. If the child is of a 4th grade reading level up into 22, and there's what's called a student aptitude quiz, and it's 26 questions. They're forced choice. So it's most likely, least likely. And then there are 3 things that you get with that. You get their MO, you get what causes them stress and what to do about it. And then you also get how they test and study the best for themselves based on their MO. The other thing that comes with it is a career index. So there's a career index that's student named. It's called OpGig. It stands for Opportunity Gig. And based on someone's MO, James, is a natural dovetail, as I mentioned about Noah when he was little, taking apart things in his room, to now. So he's going into mechatronics engineering. And that, of course, isn't a surprise for me as a mom.
Yeah.
But how you are conatively has everything to do with your level and how you're succeeding as an adult. And so my job is to identify the lane and have them stay in their lane. And so that takes care of a career too. So I have a I have a little a phrase that you don't need to pick up poop and babysit for your first gig anymore. Like, you can do other things the way you do them. And so Noah is doing that his way. He's figuring it out. So the career assessment is super interesting for parents, of course, because not a dime will be wasted on education.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. There's plenty of education to spend money on. That's for sure. And debt isn't fun. So yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I say something similar with regards to our private tutoring lessons. It's like, well, it is cheaper than college. Like, if they're serious about coding, they really want to get there, we could just do the direct path,
Right.
And so, yeah, that is true. Yeah, well, that's great. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? We're certainly going to be posting links to the website, obviously, planstoprospercoaching.com. But also, is there any other place that you'd like people to reach out to you if they have questions, or just all through the website?
So yes, a little bit as a mom. When I was an hour a day mom, or an hour a week. I grew up that way. So then I was like an hour a day with my kids, thinking that was so generous. But over the course of the years, I noticed that Noah had an electronics bend. Like, that was his thing. Like, that was his jam. And so honestly, it took a long time because it kept being electronic. He would fix everything. He would go to people's houses and fix their computers or routers or whatever electronic needed to be fixing. And he wanted to be online, and he wanted to play games and Rainbow and all this stuff that he does so well. And here I am, steadfast in my rule. So there was a moment a few years ago where they collided, and someone told me, "Gail, my gosh, you teach this to people. Like, let him do his thing. Let him do his thing." And I did. I did. I said, hey, you know what? I've had a grip on this for too long. Like, see what you can do. I'm releasing the grip. And that very day, I was talking to him outside about school or something like that. And he had a buddy call him wanting him to get online. He goes and takes the call, and he comes back and sits down with me. And I said, what are you doing, Noah? And he's like, well, I'd rather talk to you now that I have the freedom to play whenever I want.
Interesting.
So I never imagined that that would happen, but our relationship is so much better now that I have released the grip and encouraged him, obviously, to be in his lane and doing what he's doing. And he's getting paid. He's getting paid to play video games. He's getting paid to build PCs. And he just took a lifeguarding position. And he's doing it all on his own because he wants to. That's huge for me as a mom.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, that is really good. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with parents,
I
moms,
don't think
dads?
so. I would just, if you can find out how your child works as soon as possible, life's going to be a lot easier, a lot sweeter going down the road.
All right. Well, my kid
Yeah.
in a year and a half will be we'll be checking in.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome, James. Thank you.
Do you get the how do you get the bag of toys? You ship that out or?
I do. I ship it. I ship it
Okay.
out.
I was gonna say like that's a pretty physical activity. So
It is. It is. It's a the parents need to be over the shoulder of the child. So we're focusing on the hands of the kid. And honestly, yeah, focusing on the hands of the kid, we need 4 to 12 minutes worth of video to determine how that child works.
right, huh? That is really cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for coming on and helping, enable parents to understand, what these lanes are and how to encourage these kids. And, we obviously benefit when we have kids who love coding, do coding, and, seeing if it is a fit. And if it's not, that's fine. There's plenty of kids out there.
Right.
That's no skin off my back. It's really, really great when I am able to talk to a parent and they really get their child and they don't have to like second guess themselves all the time about like, hey, is this the right thing to do? Unless it's like some kind of dangerous activity, potentially like, building a grill in the backyard for 5 hours or something. But, and that's great, right? When they can even push themselves within their lane. That's so great. So, well, thank you again for coming on, and we'll be putting all the information in the show notes. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for coming
Great.
on.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you, James.
Mm-hmm.